Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Bacon. Welcome to the show, y'all. The correspondence between Sal and George became a lifeline for both of them. It was a bridge across a chasm of pain, built one slow and carefully chosen word at a time. They didn't just talk about the past. They talked about the present, about the small and ordinary details of their two and separate and lonely lives. They talked about the weather, about the food, about the quiet and simple act of getting older. They were two old men finding their way back to a friendship that had been shattered but not destroyed. And in those letters, a new and unexpected idea began to form. An idea of a different kind of justice. A justice that was not just about punishment, but about healing, about amends. George started a foundation in his grandson's name, the Kevin Johnson Foundation. It was a small and local charity dedicated to helping at-risk youth in their old neighborhood, the same neighborhood that had, in its own and indifferent way, created the tragedy that had consumed them all. And Sal, from his prison cell, became a part of it. He started a program on the inside, a mentorship program, where the old heads, the lifers, would work with the young kids who were just coming into the system. He called it the gray zone, a place where they could talk, where they could be honest, where they could try and find a different path, a path that was not just black or white, but that was filled with the complicated and messy and ultimately hopeful grays of a real and meaningful life. The two old friends, the two brothers, were working together again, on opposite sides of a wall, but on the same side of a new and more important war. A war for the souls of the next generation. And in that shared and quiet work, they both found a purpose that was bigger than their own and personal, grief. They had taken the ugliest and most painful part of their lives, and they were turning it into something beautiful. Something that would last, something that would honor the memory of the boy they had both in their own and different ways lost. Sal came up for parole after 8 years. He was an old man, his health failing. He walked into that hearing room with no expectation, no hope. He was ready to die in that cage. But there was an unexpected person there to speak on his behalf. George. He stood before the parole board, a quiet and dignified old man, and he told them the whole story about his grandson, about his friend, about the tragedy and about the healing. He told them about the foundation, about the work that Sal was doing on the inside. This man took my grandson's life, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he could not hide. And that is a debt that can never be repaid. But he has spent the last 8 years of his life trying to pay it in the only way he can, by saving other young men from the same and tragic fate. And I believe that my grandson, he would have wanted that. He would have wanted his own and senseless death to have some kind of meaning. His words were a powerful and unexpected testament to the possibility of redemption. And they made a difference. The parole board granted Sal's release. He walked out of those gates an old and frail man into the waiting arms of his best and only friend. The two old men, the two brothers, just held each other and they wept. Tears of grief, of joy, of a long and painful and finally blessedly ended journey. Sal spent the last 2 years of his life living with George and working at the foundation. He was a quiet and gentle presence, a man who was living a life of a quiet and profound and unending amends. He had found his peace. He was buried in the same and quiet cemetery as Kevin. Two souls, a victim and a killer, finally and strangely at rest together. And so we come to the end of the story of the tears behind the pawn shop counter. A story of a single and tragic mistake and the long and difficult and ultimately hopeful journey of two old friends and the wreckage they left behind. It's a story that reminds us that the lines between good and evil, between victim and perpetrator, are not always so clear. Sal was a good man who did a terrible thing. Kevin was a lost boy who made a fatal mistake. They were both just human, flawed and broken and deserving of a grace that the world does not often give. And it's a story about a different kind of justice, a justice that is not found in a courtroom or in a prison cell, but in the quiet and courageous act of forgiveness, the forgiveness that George offered to Sal, and the forgiveness that Sal, in the end, was able to offer to himself. It's a reminder that the most profound healing often comes not from forgetting, but from remembering, from taking the most painful parts of our past and using them to build a better and more compassionate future. The Kevin Johnson Foundation is still there, a small and bright light in a dark and often hopeless neighborhood. It is a legacy that was born from a tragedy, a testament to the idea that even in the midst of a profound and senseless loss, it is possible to create something beautiful, something meaningful, something that will last. The final chapter of this story is a quiet one. It is the story of two old men sitting on a park bench playing a game of chess. Sal and George, two survivors of the same and brutal storm. They didn't talk much about the past. They didn't have to. It was always there, a silent and acknowledged presence between them. They just were. Two friends who had been to hell and back together and who had, against all odds, found their way back to each other. And in that simple and quiet and profound act of a shared and enduring friendship, they found their own and final kind of salvation. And it's a reminder that a life is not defined by its worst moment. It is defined by what we do after, the amends we make, the healing we seek, the love we give. Sal had taken a life, but he had also, in his own and quiet way, helped to save a dozen others. And in that, there is a lesson for us all, that the human heart is a resilient and mysterious thing. It can be broken, it can be shattered, but it can also heal. It can learn to forgive. It can learn to love again. And that in the end is the only victory that truly matters. The quiet and hard-won and profoundly beautiful victory of the human spirit. And so we come to the end of the line. The story of two old friends and a boy who was lost in the grave. A story that shows you that the most dangerous weapon in the world is not a gun, but a moment of a simple and stupid desperation. Kevin was not a monster. He was a kid who was chasing a dream that the streets had sold him. And he paid for that dream with his life. Sal was not a killer. He was a man who had made a living in the shadows and who, in the end, was consumed by a darkness he had thought he could control. This story is a tragedy, but it is also a story of a profound and unexpected grace. The grace of a friendship that was stronger than grief. The grace of a community that was willing to forgive. And the grace of two old men who chose to build a legacy of hope on the foundation of their own and shared and heartbreaking loss. And it's a reminder that the tears behind the pawn shop counter, the tears of a man who has lost everything, can sometimes be the water that helps a new and more beautiful thing to grow. A garden in the middle of a wasteland, a quiet and hard-won and profoundly hopeful peace. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.